excited to introduce our next alumni of distinction. Alumna. I get it all confused. And how long have I been here? Drew Cogbill. So for those of you, you probably have seen Drew around. Hopefully, if you've been attending his jobs workshops, he's been giving back to the community by helping people find jobs, which might be on some graduates' minds right now. I don't know, maybe. And the surprising thing is that Drew also has a job. Drew is at the New York Times. He's you're a product manager, senior product. I don't know if there's
That's right.
Senior.
Yeah, senior full on.
Senior product manager at the New York Times in mobile applications. And Drew was in my thesis studio. I remember quite distinctly a project that he did for his thesis called Pigeon, which he said he's not going to show today. But the best thing about Pigeon is that it had this kind of like tagline sound, you know, but it was like a calling app, so it was all audio. There's no visual component to it. And it had this sound that I can't get out of my head, and it's been 9 years, Drew, since you graduated, and I still... Can you do it? Can you do the whistle?
Oh my gosh. I don't remember. Yeah,
Yeah, it was
that's
like, and it's like, it's in there forever. So anyway, without further ado, Drew Cogbill.
Hey everybody. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about my pre-DT life. So we'll just dive in, calling this jazz hands, how performing arts taught me about product management, which is the job that I have now. So like Colleen said, I recently joined the New York Times. There I am the senior mobile product manager. So I oversee both our Android and iOS news apps. And before that, I spent about 8 years at a mobile product studio focusing on things mobile. So I built like 45 different apps for tons of different companies like Disney and Aetna and all kinds of different folks. And I was here at DT from 2007 to 2009. But before all of that, I went to the University of Arkansas where I focused on chemistry. So I did like nanotechnology research and music. And with music, I really was a singer. I was a baritone, and I focused, so I'd like to spend my time now kind of diving in on that area of music. I've always kind of wondered like what connections I've drawn from those early experiences into where I've got now, specifically in the area of product management, or from y'all's standpoint, definitely just making stuff, which I think is like what we're all concerned with here. So I've identified kind of 6 different themes that I want to talk about, kind of the overlap between performing arts and product management. But before that, I need to show some pictures of me literally doing jazz hands, just to show you how legitimate I am in this space. So I was in a jazz choir to get extra scholarship money as an undergrad, and many of our performances really featured me with amazing hair and actually doing in there at the end, doing full-on jazz hands. At least here I had the decency to cover my face. So in case you aren't really familiar with the role of product management, it is a lot of what you're learning as a DT student, it turns out. So really where I work is at the overlap of design, technology, and business. It's really the way that most digital products are produced these days. You have someone in my role who is sitting at that point advocating for the user, but making sure that we're creating something of value for the company as well. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the deep need to create. So like I said, I was a baritone, and I sang art songs and opera. And my voice teacher was Janice Yos. This is Janice Yos. She was an operatic soprano. She did Wagner. She sang the Met. She was amazing. It taught me many, many things. But when I was leaving undergrad, one of the lessons that she taught me, I came to her, I was trying to figure out my life and what I was going to do, which I promise I will figure out someday. But Janice told me, listen, the performing arts are hard. you should really only do them if you can't do anything else. Like, it's an itinerant life. It's not easy to get a job doing it. And as you can see, I was able to do something else, but I never really lost that sense or that need of wanting to make things that other people would experience, having my voice out there in a public way. And I found that by doing product management, or many of the jobs that you guys will go on to doing, you will be able to still put your work out there so that the world can experience it. I also, beyond singing, I did theater as well, and I was an assistant director for a professor named Amy Herzberg, and I worked on a show with her called Into the Woods. And really what that meant for being her assistant director was getting to sit there and learn like how to be a director and watch her do cool things because I had no idea what I was doing. And one of the things I really learned from her, it was actually her second time directing Into the Woods. And when asked about that by other people, she called out that she really had collected a whole new body of experiences herself, and by working and knowing other people since her first time, that she was able to bring to the production. So I think a key thing in directing and being able to tell effective stories on the stage is understanding humans and the connections that we make between them, and that's certainly a key part of product management, or just making products that are actually effective for people. A thing that I also teach here at DT, and a thing that I always make my students do is tell me what's their on their project, who is their audience, and what are they doing for them. So understanding your literal audience in theater, but certainly in the creation of products, helps us understand that. What we can do to most effectively impact them. And to most effectively impact them, we have to understand who they are and why they connect with other people. Amy also was incredibly good at having a very strong vision of the shows that she wanted to execute on. She was intensely detail-oriented and really had a lot of control over every single aspect of her productions. And I found that that has a lot of overlaps with where I want to do, how I want to do things in product management. What was great about the way that Amy approached her productions and the way that I try to do things is to really do that through a sense of curiosity. So I just can't stop asking questions of my developers and of my business people and of my designers because I want to know. I want to understand why we're doing what we are doing because I care so much about our users and what we're doing for them. So I try to bring that sense of control and ownership via a curiosity and positivity through my passion there. This is a whiteboard for a game that I was working on with Disney, and doing that type of clarification is incredibly useful when you are building something for a client. A lot of times you've really got to help them articulate the requirements of what they want to do. So finding ways to build your own vision and help them articulate or sharpen their vision is a big part of what you end up doing as a product manager. Of course, something that you can't just rely on your own vision. You need to rely on the people that you're working with. And I think that is one of the particularly Herculean parts of DT, I find, is that these projects that you guys are working on, like, you're really the person. One of the lovely things about getting out there into the world professionally is that generally you're working with a team. You get to rely on the strengths of other people. But of course, some of the challenges of that are that there are now other people. So you need to have someone in a role like product management that can sharpen and focus the attention and the abilities of other people. So a lot of what I try to do as a product manager is empower my team members to feel even more ownership on the overall product, but also to do their job better than they think that they could do. Another director that I worked with was Michael Landman when I was at the University of Arkansas, and I worked on a show. Here's another embarrassing picture of me. I worked on a show called Big Love, not related to the television show at all. But the lesson that I really learned from Michael was that anytime during rehearsal that an actor or anybody had an idea or a particular thing that they want to bring to the scene, he would always just let them try it. And more times than not, it was an awesome idea. So really letting your team find cool things that might be outside of their area, so letting my developers understand design or have business input on things is a really key part of product management to me, and I really feel like I've learned some of that from Michael back in the day. Minimizing risk is certainly a big interest of the business part of product management. And really, the way that you guys probably already think about a lot of this is through prototyping. We prototype to be able to create things quickly, to try out our ideas, and really to minimize the risks. So how do we get, oh my gosh, my sock is on, I'm getting GDPR socks. This is my major thing. Okay. We can talk more later. So the business, speaking of risk, certainly wants to try things, but we also are really interested in seeing like what's going to impact our users the quickest. Like how can we know that we are making something that will actually help people out there in the world? And rehearsal is a literal prototype. So it's out there, it's trying a thing, it's spending the time, it's putting things together and looking at them and taking your best guess and having a few people come in and look at things, but also knowing that when the audience gets into the room that things will change, that they will react in ways that you can't expect, and you'll need to adapt those things as the show continues. Another key part, obviously, of prototyping is user testing, which is part of that, I think, about the idea of an audience and testing with them. And there's an acting lesson that Amy Herzberg taught us, that everyone is a liar and trying to get something, which is something that I, positivity, humanity. But I do think that when you're doing user testing, it's generally, I'm much more interested in seeing how people, what they do versus what they say or what they want out of a particular product. Usually their intentions are much more clear when they're doing something. So this is a prototype from one of my classes where somebody was making a math game, and they were quickly iterating on it based on like the things that people were actually doing. Like, were they actually having fun in their interactions with other people? It got fun through the actual prototyping. So another big lesson that Janice Yo's, my voice teacher, gave me was that the audience is rooting for you. So the way that she would encourage you to get on stage, if you were afraid, if you were in this point, is to know that, yeah, there are trolls out there, but most people in this room actually just want you to succeed. So go out there and make something. And I think that that holds very true for product management or just making products in general. Most people are excited about trying new things and seeing new perspectives on things that they haven't thought of before. So I think that really connects both with product management in general, and hopefully also just where you guys are here in your thesis product. You should be really proud, I think, of all the work that you've done. So in general, I think that for the performing arts really help us understand each other, understand how to work with the audience better, and hopefully help us make better products. Thank you. So, shall I introduce folks to them? Very well.
Hi everybody, I'm Paolo. I am a visual storyteller, and this is my thesis project, and I'm going to be talking about Tales of the Aswang, Filipino mythology, monster tales to virtual reality. So a little bit of my background, which is a bit kind of wide, was, so I kind of grew up in California in the Philippines, and I'm quite passionate about stories. At a young age, I went through photojournalism because it was the only way I could go out and take photographs and tell stories. At the time, I used a single lens reflex camera, and I took photographs to tell stories. Eventually, this led me to new ways to tell stories by exploring video, moving images, and eventually new mediums such as flash animation, 3D animation, and this led me to start leading a couple of teams that eventually started doing things and telling stories about bigger bigger narratives. That's me and my team. Before I came to Parsons, we did things like social justice, cultural preservation, multimedia production, and worked alongside several of these groups. So what led me to my project was, it started out when I worked on a project with the European Union to do research on neonatal healthcare with indigenous groups, and a preservation project of a weaving process with the Tiboli tribe in Lake Cebu. And one of the projects that came out of that was a book that talked about the weaving process and a video. And as well, we wanted to do an augmented reality project, but that's still something that was still going on before I went to Parsons. So I wanted to pass on just to see what this little piece was. And earlier concepts for my idea was I sort of wanted to do this indigenous mythological narrative to simulate an interactive story. However, the problem with this was there was this sort of danger of appropriating culture, because this type of indigenous group was not part completely of the entire Philippine story, because it's a bunch of different tribes that went from around Malaysia, Indonesia, the Spanish colonizers, and so I didn't want to go into that. But late one night, something surprised me. They told me not to go into the woods because they told me there was a monster that was there, and this was a monster that I've heard from my grandparents that sort of scared me, and I was surprised that they've also heard about this. So I started diving more into Filipino mythological creatures and started finding interesting things, that there are these many characters, heroes and gods and monsters. They explain natural phenomena of something supernatural. There are legends that explain origins of the way of the world. And so most of the time you might think they're like the Greek gods and the European werewolves and counterparts, right? Well, not really, because the mythology is part of oral tradition, and it's something that evolves over time. And it's sort of this process that's still being continued on today, that it's in this part of rediscovery and recording, and various tribes still talk about them. And kids that are growing up in modern cities still talk about them because they're still being talked about by their parents, their grandparents, and it sort of influences a lot of their personalities and their behaviors. So this basically led me into producing a VR game that welcomes you to the world of Filipino mythology, filled with the most prolific and yet mysterious lore of the Aswang. And the tales basically speak of timeless truths about society that we carry on to the present day. And with a country comprising over 7,000 islands, 20 different regional languages, 120 dialects, there's a lot of monsters to basically talk about. And I chose VR because I felt that they have the right scale to sort of fit this VR experience. So what is an Aswang? So culturally, it is often referred to a shape-shifting monster, usually possessing a nature in the traits. But Dr. Maximo Ramos, who did a dissertation on this, he now associates the word Aswang as sort of this collective term for all the different types of mythical beings. And despite the fact that during the time of colonization by Spain, where the top was successful and the bottom wasn't so successful, these myths still sort of prevailed. And despite the fact that the way the North sees the South being so different, even though they are quite modern, they still all know that they all collectively own these stories. And I thought that was something very interesting. And because up in the North is where all the media is controlled, a lot of the influence always all comes from the West. And they all come from various places, mostly coming from European and various things coming from, of course, TV. So you end up having stuff like this, rip-offs of Twilight, rip-offs of Arrow, and it sort of frustrates a lot of the people who grew up down in the South and the Middle Islands, where all their culture sort of prevailed throughout the years. And this is what's being fed through TV screens, and they felt so, I don't want to watch this, so let's start our own group of content. So what exists is, there are websites that sort of collates all these stories, and a dissertation by Dr. Maximo Ramos, who wanted to bring these myths to the academe because they're a wonderful conversation piece for a lot of the children growing up. And he writes in his book that it's quite sad that although we accept these stories as entertaining to our children, we reject our own folktales about the equivalent characters as superstitious and undesirable. And it's about time we change that perspective, that we accepted our own literary heritage and use it as if we were to make education meaningful to our children. Oops, sorry. So this recently came out, and it's been a lot of controversy, mainly because Bagani is a term used by the indigenous groups, and a lot of the actors that are on this film are basically half Spanish, half white, and they were sort of really, a lot of the locals who belong in those groups felt very offended by it, because this was something that was produced up in the north. So I'm going on to basically, I'm just going to share one of the monsters that I added in my VR game, which was the Kabeer. And the really interesting about it is they're 7 feet tall, they have dark skin, they have long hair, they enjoy confusing people. But what makes this very interesting is this is basically brought into the theory that the Spanish propagated these stories about the Kabeer to prevent Filipinos from assisting any escaped African slaves. When the Spanish took control of the Philippines, it was decreed illegal to hold Filipinos as slaves because they were under the subjection of King Philip II. However, this was ignored, and Spanish conquistadors seized and sold Filipinos in various parts of the country. But despite the aims of the Spanish trying to demonize a lot of these monsters, they ended up still becoming something that's very friendly to the myth, that sort of prevailed almost hundreds of years after World War I and World War II. And I wanted to build a VR game that sort of explored this narrative of talking about social issues. And just to waltz through, before I wrap up, because this entire process was really huge, that I actually had to go through a reevaluation of various workflows to re-examine how to build a VR game by bringing in film, the agile development, and sprint. There was a lot of concept art that happened through this entire process. Sound design that was very that was brought in. The modeling and endless amounts of user testing, which is a bit big. So my goal for this project was basically to hopefully start a series of discussions, because this is something that's still quite there, but it's fading because a lot of people are seeing other types of content on the internet. And when I posted, I pretty much received a lot of good amounts of feedback. I had an article from Esquire that was written, and I'm still hoping to sort of work more into this project to hopefully start conversations and pieces about it. And that's it. Thank you. That's Kabeer. Yeah, that works.
So I'll be presenting you my thesis that I've been working on for 1 year. It's a concept music album that I co-authored with my neural network. And when I started my thesis, actually, I came from a music background to this school, and I was always interested in expressing my ideas through music. So over the 2 years, whatever exposure I got for the technologies and stuff, I wanted to express it using the music album, because that's what I've been trying to make for more than 5 years now. But then when I came across artificial intelligence, it became like a field that I was really interested in, seeing the fact that it is taking over humans and it is taking over all the all possibilities of human work, like let's say creativity or something that we think that only humans can do. So then I thought that I would be expressing the journey of AI and how it has been changing our world through a music album. So when I started the storyline for the album, as every album has it, I thought that I'll be talking through each compositions and talking about the different phases of the world. So then I thought that the first composition can be talking about the world where there is no AI, there are no computers, which let's say is before 1950s. Then let's say the second composition talking about the world in which it's AI plus human, which is the current world. And the third composition is probably, let's say, by 2045, let's say we make it singularity. So it would be talking about the world where AI has taken over the human labor and a lot of human work that we consider are not possible right now for the AI to take over. So this is how I broke down the album, but detailing out the artificial digitality as the name, because it's digital. The future is going to be digital, but it's going to be artificial. So I coined a term like artificial digitality, which fits the name of the album. But while I was researching about machine learning and artificial intelligence, I had a thought that if I'm talking about that the world is supposed to be taken over by AI, I thought the music album that I've been working on should also be taken over by AI. So the composer for all the three compositions cannot be just me. It should be something more than that. So I can have, that's a machine copying my style, and my brain getting cloned by a CPU or a computer that would be like copying my music style and making the music the way exactly I make. So I went through a lot of different options and I checked out how machine learning works, and I developed algorithms that could copy my brain. So this not only gave me possibilities of having an extra computer, like an extra brain that could copy my passion, but can also give me an extra time to work on some other things, probably find new passion in my life. So this is how then I broke down the new album. So along with the state of the world that I was trying to talk through all the compositions, I thought that the composer also needs to change. So if we are talking about the world before 1950, the composer also just has to be human, exactly the way the state of the world was. And then let's say if you're talking on the current world, which is from 1950 to 2045, it should be the composer has to be human plus the neural networks. And then the third one just has to be the neural networks, which is the state of the world, like only artificial intelligence. So this is like a basic tedious process in which I use mathematics, neural networks, and machine learning to make my brain copy to a computer, in which like I had the piano keys, I numbered them, and I derived sequences and numbers from them, which I then normalized the value, then I fed it to the three different neural networks which I developed, and then they were giving me answers of what the music should be and how the music should be composed. So let's say this is the breakdown of the process. So let's say if I'm composing the very first album music piece, so it is broken down in two parts of the music. It's the chord structure and the melody structure. So the chord follows like three succession of notes followed by the other notes. And then I derived the chord sequences, which I fed to the neural network. And for the melody part, I had like two sequences, which is the sequences of the notes and sequences of the time concession between the notes. So this three neural networks are fed with the three sequences that I got from here. And the normalizing of the values were done to decrease the errors that could be possibly available if we had kept within 1 to 16 or even more than that. So for this, once the neural networks were trained through the data, actually they were able to tell me and copy my music style. So when I feed in the data in the input layer, it would give me what I must have played had the computer been my brain. So this is the process for the second song, in which I'm playing one note or one chord, then I'm asking the computer what should be the second chord. And the computer gives me mathematical data, which I converted into musical notes, and I feed it to the music software. And then this way the second song was composed, in which I do the partial work, the other work is done by the neural network. But for the third song, I just gave it the starting. Everything else is given by the neural network because I kept feeding the data that I got, and I kept getting the answers from the neural network. When it came to naming the songs, I was like really speculative, a little picky about what should the names be. But that got there through how the state of the world was. So like initially the inventions happened when they were necessity. So the first song turned out to be more like necessity is the mother of invention. And the second song is curiosity. Like right now all of us are trying different technologies, but we don't know where is it going to take us. So like everybody's into VR, AR, mathematics, Unity, blah, 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 blah stuff. So it can be a funny trouble. It might lead us to a world where the humans go obsolete and it's just the machines. Or it may go the other way around. So curiosity, a funny trouble. And the third song is like, let's say, then you have a machine, which is supposed to be considered as our slave. And what if we become their slaves? So how would you defend us out of future when you don't know the machine has taken over us? So usually before like in 1950 when the Turing test was done, it was for knowing what was done by AI. But I thought that was too mainstream, so I made a new test called cooling test because the product is developed under my name. So it's the half of my name and it probably sounded cool. I don't know if you guys think it's cool. So I'll be playing 3 compositions, and I would want you guys to know which composition was made by whom, or which composition was made by me alone, and the third one, which is actually made by me and the computer. So I'll be playing 3 random ones. I haven't arranged them in any way, but enjoy. I'll play the second song now, and I want you guys to know who's the composer for the second two. One of you guys to tell me who was the composer for the first composition. Okay, I mean my batchmates are not lying.
Computer.
Yeah.
Oh, the first one was computer?
Yeah.
Actually, the first one is computer and me. Okay. Okay, so 2 guys right. Okay, what do you think of the second one?
You.
Actually, that's just a computer.
Oh, wow. So much better than you.
I mean, that's actually what brings us to a bigger question, that if the computers are going to get better than us, how are we going to define it? And the third one is just me, of course. So once I was doing my thesis, when I was doing this thing, I came to a conclusion and a point where I was like, so how do we define creativity and how do we define art? In a world where creativity was supposed to be the intrinsic property of a human, how do we say like what is creative and what is art? In future, how are we going to define it? And the second direction that I've started taking over now is I want to work in making intelligent interfaces, because interfaces is where we designers and artists leave our marks, and it's almost the unconscious data, so it cannot lie. So probably we can make AI systems which are way more powerful and way more trustworthy than the current AI system in which you have been taking conscious data. So let's say an interface where they take your data and they know what kind of stuff you make, and probably a computer can be part of your creative process, then how would the creative process be? So what are the new possibilities that open up when we merge UI or UI UX plus AI? Like how do we make an embedded property AI as the part of UI UX? And yeah, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming down. It's been a long day. My name is Kabeer, and I'll be presenting Cinemapper, which is an open source platform for interactive films. In the last 2 years alone, we have seen a plethora of interactive content being put out there in front of people. Be it the Mosaic app that was created by Steven Soderbergh, or the recently released board games by Sam Barlow, or another small German company which has made in-theater voting app control movies which lets you decide for the characters. This got me very excited. I wanted to make my own interactive film. And trying to do this, I spent about a month writing, shooting, directing an interactive film called Echo. It was about a girl who was paranoid about everyone looking at her and how the government was keeping tabs. And once the film was done, I was supposed to go up and show this project. So the film was edited and I was very confident it's going to take me a night or two. I'm going to open up open frameworks and everything is going to be fine. Once I started doing this, open frameworks would not play 4K videos and it would crash. I pulled up Unity, pulled up Solids, Unity would crash too. Processing obviously does not support such high resolution data and that failed too. And failure will be a very important part throughout the process. And then I went back to JavaScript, something that I was very comfortable with. I was like, let's give it a try. And it completely worked. I was able to put up my interactive film on the web that you could use. The only problem that was there was I could not share it with people. I would have to literally send them a whole package file with HTML, CSS files, which was obviously not very accessible. So I went back and saw at a lot of research that I had done on if interactive content has such a right market, why has it not become mainstream yet? And I came across 3 things. Number one, shooting movies itself is very expensive. It's a teamwork that needs a lot of effort and hard work and takes a lot of time as well. Now, if someone makes an interactive content, they have to pay developers. And due to that, most of the interactive content out there is paid content. So it's not accessible to a lot of people. Most of the YouTubers out there or creators out there are creating content because it's free to create and it's free to share. And number 3 was since 1973, where the first interactive content was seen in the form of a text adventure book, where you would have 7 series of books which you would read and you could decide for the characters. No one has actually shared the process of how do they go about creating it. There is no documentation apart from some processes. There is no tool. So I found a gap which I thought I could fill. And then I came up with the idea of creating Cinemapper. I'll play a short video.
Welcome to Cinemapper, a platform for interactive films. Explore hundreds of experiences amongst our library and interact with unique cinematics created by artists. Reader, use our online tool, for creating your own experience without writing a single line of code. Choose from our pre-existing prefabs or create your own and share with the world. You won't even need a camera with our new mobile version. Shoot, upload, and edit, all from the phone in your pocket. Cinemapper. Create, explore, contribute.
Okay, so this is where the product is at. Currently, it's been created, it's online, people use it. But when I started the process, the first question I wanted to ask was, who was going to use Cinemapper? So I spent a day or two talking to people, figuring out who's going to use it, and I decided, okay, gamers and mobile streamers are the people who are going to use it, the people who are interested in it, and that's the niche crowd that I want to cater to. But after a lot of presentations, a lot of sprint cycles, I realized I was again wrong. My research was wrong and it failed. It turns out I cannot really decide who's going to use this. So I pivoted a little bit from my process and actually went into who's going to create this content. And that's where I think there was a good answer to this. So I reached out to a lot of filmmakers from New York Film Academy, Los Angeles Film School, a few friends back in India, and there was a film that I was making myself. And I started a long process of creating a tool, which is not a UX project, it was something that was always online, which I would share with them, and they would start creating their own films on this, ideas that they wanted to explore. And that's how the process came about and the tool came to existence. So my methodology was cyclic. I would try something, it would fail, I would go back, I would iterate, republish it online, share it with people, and keep going through and through and through. And going through shorter sprint cycles, when you work on products in the industry, it's like generally 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whereas I brought it down to 3 or 4 days of constant feedback from people because it had to improve. So I started from something like this, which is completely hard-coded, looked ugly, moving on to something that was more stable in its backend, would pull data, and I started creating it using PHP, MySQL, and JavaScript, just because there was enough documentation out there. And also I'm just a designer. I've just been coding for the last 2 years, and I felt sticking to this would be much easier, and I could create a much more sophisticated tool. And slowly I started moving towards something that was more user-friendly, that was more focused on GUI. And another thing that came through while deciding this process was it had to be mobile accessible. Everyone uses their phones now. There are very less people who would access this if they wanted to just see content from their laptop. So it became mobile compatible. Once that was done, the final version was created, which you can access right now if you want to on gohel.com/cinemapper. I don't have cinemapper.com because it's like 8 grand to buy. So that's something that I look forward to. And seeing these pristine mock-ups looks nice, but I talk about 2 decisions on how they were made. Was most of the tool that you see right now was not easy to make. It took a lot of time, a lot of cycling through, a lot of iterations, and a lot of user testing. I think that's very important when you're trying to make something, because we as designers assume a lot. And I think the best way is to accept that we're wrong and we're going to fail. And based on these films that were created, we created 2 prefabs as well that the filmmakers would use. One was your typical parallel narrative. This was created by Linus Ignatius, where someone dies in a housewarming party, and you can follow 7 characters at the same time and switch between them. So we started calling it a parallel prefab. And as a result, a lot of people just started using it because they found novelty in the idea. The next prefab that we created was called your basic textbook adventure prefab, where you could decide for the character. So a girl asks a guy for a date, whether you want to go or not, and you decide, and the story starts diverging. And these were the 2 main prefabs that we created. We also gave them an option of custom prefab, and in the coming time, hopefully we'll have more iterations on how many kinds of interactive stories you can tell. And yeah, it's again mobile accessible now. And now what's the future of Cinemapper? This is just a plan which again is going, we've already realized it's not going to work, it's going to probably fail, but is to look for open web grants and maybe monetize high resolution usage for specific users. But then again, we get into various conundrums of how are they going to be monetized, how they're going to be repaid. And yeah, that's it. And a special thanks to Colleen sitting right there. Paolo is not here. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
So now again, we ask the participants to come on up to the front. We'll have a little bit of a question and answer listed by you, and perhaps some questions.
Great work, guys. Congratulations.
This is good. We can just pass it around. Good. Okay. So the last panel, I only copied in-depth, but I thought the question was really nice, and I thought that's actually how we might start. They were asked, what are 3 words that describe the world that you're trying to make with your project, or 3 like kind of words that describe the impact that you're trying to have on the world? So just like 3 things that are kind of the big things, I guess.
Should I start? I should have sat here.
Yeah.
Dialogue. Conversation, I think they're probably the same, and inspiration.
I would say helpful, exploratory, and engaging.
This is actually a tough one, only sitting here and answering this, but I'll go with evolution, harmony, and peace.
Very cool.
So, Paolo, I feel like I just need to ask many more questions about things, but yeah, I can't wait to play. I was interested, I mean, so much of the medium probably influenced like the type of storytelling that you were interested in. Did just the VR experience itself like change the fact that like the types of monsters that you ended up choosing, or the types of experiences that you ended up giving to people?
Yes. Well, because this is at the very start, they asked me how different would this be used like a typical game medium. And when I was prototyping on those types of mediums, a lot of the users wanted like snazzy graphics, they wanted interesting play mechanics, they wanted to like just talk about the stories of the monsters and see and focus on environmental storytelling, the sounds of the space. And by choosing VR, I was able to play with things such as scale, where the first monster was around 8 feet tall and was really tall. And I decided to sort of put even the simplest monsters that used to scare you because they just inhabit the space. And VR has to sort of weigh that. It's almost as if you feel the presence of something that's not there. So if something is just standing there, doing this idle animation, you start feeling as if it's in the same presence with you, and that sort of creates that effect that I sort of wanted to do with the storytelling of the experience. So yeah, it definitely affected the way I selected the monsters.
Testing is certainly, I'm sure, like this early testing seems like there's an impact there, and all in all, I'd be interested to know like what were some big testing moments that you all found that really changed the course of the projects that you were working on?
I think we already talked about this. One very big moment while testing was like really realizing that I really can't control who's going to do it, first of all, who's going to use the product and who are the people who are going to adopt it. So pivoting from the idea of people who are going to use it to people who are going to engage with it changed. Apart from that, another thing that became very evident quickly is how other products around you affect what you're making. There are certain assumptions that a user would make. For example, a plus button gives them an idea, okay, something is going to be added, right? Or something is going to either pop up or I'm going to get into a menu. You could not use it for anything else, whereas I was using the plus button to drag and drop, and then could not get it. So also like how your current environment is influencing your product and how do you create new interactions is something that really hit me, that I can't just go out there and be like, okay, here are the new interaction sets and you're going to use these sets. People are like, no, we will not use these. So yeah.
In the project that I was working on, when I did the testing part, actually turned out that like mostly people were interested in listening to music. They really didn't care whether it was AI making music or what the composer was doing when it came to music making. So what I found was is like technology has changed a lot of definitions. So the definition of music, creativity, and everything actually has evolved. So when we give this type of product for the users to test, for them actually they're interested in seeing what the product is rather than who made the product and stuff. So it also led me to think whether I was giving it to the wrong audience, but then it also led me to a thought that audience is always someone who will be like having way more thought than what you can think, or your empathy level may not reach to take care of all the audiences. So as a designer, I guess it became important for me to know what I was working on rather than like targeting specific thing, and I tried to understand how technology has changed everything.
So for my user testing, despite the fact that we've also had sound design and everything, those were all proven user tests with history, the one that I found with VR was, from my user test, was visual convenience. Was that when you're creating a space and you want the player or the user to go to a direction, there's sort of this thing that people need to see that it's quite near to them so they can actually go there. It's almost the same as, let's say, you want to go to the bakery downstairs and it's just an elevator ride downstairs compared to going to McDonald's, which is a few more steps. You'd rather go to the bakery because it's just downstairs. And even though you know McDonald's is just right over there, you still don't want to go because mentally you know it would take more steps. So in VR, I sort of had to design the levels in such a way that everything seemed really close to the player for every step so that it wouldn't feel inconvenient for them, even though it was really near. It's like, oh, it's there, I can keep going. And that's how I sort of led them to each part of the story naturally.
Did you find that insight through just people kind of feeling aimless like in early testing, or like what led you to that decision?
People stop the experience when they're told to go to that direction. Yeah, it's like, I want you to go, I'm tired, I don't want to go there. It's like, okay, and then when I started making things like shorter and shorter, they just kept going and going and going. It's like, okay, that's good, I'll just keep making it shorter and shorter. I'll see how far they can go.
That's fascinating. Cool. Yeah, Kuldeep, I was interested also in your audience definition, things you were starting to talk about there. And part of what I think you were teasing out is that you yourself are kind of the audience there as the creator, which I think is super interesting. Because I'm wondering, something that you mentioned was like maybe by having the machine compose for me, it will free me up to have other pursuits. Did you find that was actually true for yourself? Like, or even like when you guys were composing on something together, like, was it more fun? How did it make you feel as the composer versus like worrying about like the listeners, audience?
Actually, when I was working with the computer, what happened was that it became like another half which I did not able to predict. So for me, it became more fascinating about what the outcome would be rather than just thinking that it's a computer making stuff in me. Because as a human, we have, when it comes to arts or design, we do have collaborators which are other humans. But then having a collaborator like a computer which has already copied your style, and then still seeing something new, you would always be like fascinated about what the outcome could be. And other thing about the day morning thing that we were talking about, the presentation, is also that I'm actually very happy to have a computer. Like, I still believe that computers should be our slaves, not we the slaves. Like, I always think that the technology has to be a step down than us, step below us, I would say, when we should be controlling it, not the other way around. So in a way, it was actually more fun to have a computer listening to me and have to like, okay, make music for me now, and it gives me like, okay, this is what you should be making now. And I'm like, okay, fine, I don't like you. I'll make another file. So yeah, I'm not able to do the same with the human file and end up fighting or something. So it was much fun.
Kabeer, interactive film is certainly something DT students played with for years and is fascinating. I think what was interesting is you got to explore from yourself, like what was working and not working to find the problems that you wanted to solve. You also started working with other people. What were like the biggest problems that you saw that you feel like your platform is going to help people solve so that it can become a more prominent medium?
The first problem that I wanted to solve, and I'm still trying to solve it, was you don't have to write a single line of code. You know, that was the first thing everyone hated. No one wants to open frameworks and learn it or try it. So the first thing was to cut that barrier and make it open. The second thing was I always envisioned it as it's something like YouTube, but the tool set that's given to you makes you or empowers you to go in and create anything you want. And inside, when I started, like one of those videos had just buttons, and that's what I thought people just wanted buttons on the screen. But collaborating with people was very important because in time I realized people first of all wanted to completely control the buttons. So from what font is there to what color to what opacity to where it appears on the screen and how long it appears on the screen. So those were the first set of huge things that I changed from traditional just buttons on screen. The second thing that ended up happening was a lot of people did not even want buttons. They just wanted hotspots. Stuff like, these are 3 doors, which door do you want to enter? And you could just tap on that door and you would go in. So that's the third set of tools that we brought in. And the fourth was obviously the visual layout that you saw of the story. That was something I did not start with, but everyone said it's so confusing. I don't know what of my clips are relating to what's being connected, and that's how the visual tool came out. So I think these 3 things are complete control over your interface of interaction, which is completely up to you. What do you want to do? Do you want to put on a JPEG, PNG, whatever? And the next thing was when you see the tool from a distance, so you get an overall map view. I think those 2 things make it stand out.
Do we have any questions from the audience? No problem.
Oh, there's one. Oh, thanks.
I have a question for Kabeer about Cinemapper. So I noticed you definitely mentioned that platform concerns are one of the things that you're looking at. Considering that the medium of film is changing so much, people are looking at film in VR, or just looking at the way that we express films in large scales like IMAX theaters, how do you sort of see Cinemapper keeping up with the future of interactive films?
That's a question that I've already tried to fiddle around with, like where the future is. And I was kind of trying to fight between is cinema going to become bigger and bigger, as you said, IMAX and VR, or is it going to become smaller and smaller in our hands? And my approach was to go the other way. I still see more people, and another inspiration was when I go back home, when I'm on the subway, no one is looking at anyone. Everyone is looking at their phone screens, right? So that was my idea, that this is where people are going and I need to bring it out of this laptop screen and put it right in their hands. So yeah, I see it as being something that's more customized, more personal viewing, less of a community viewing experience as per se. That's what we're losing out. That's what new filmmakers talk about, that we are losing it. Screens and phones are killing it. But I think it's maybe another way of to embrace it. And that's where I think it will go. And that's why I focused on making it scalable. Thank you.
Okay.
We can.
Okay, so it's for Kuldeep. Sam, you said that your first song was about how pre-1950s human beings made music without technology, but it seems that that might depend on how you're defining technology. Because so, one could argue that whatever instrument, however basic it could be considered technology. So I was wondering about that.
When I started thinking of making the first song, it was actually mainly I wanted to talk about the story of there were no computers, or AI was just coined. So technology, like we can define it in several ways, like given those days of Stone Age when we used to just have bows and arrows, it was other form of technology. Like right now, this area is in the form of world where it is technology is digitalized. So it's getting virtual, it's using mathematics and stuff. So when I talked about the first composition, it was actually the time when AI did not take over. So technology probably wasn't conscious, wasn't smart enough to cope up with us. So this is the phase of the world when technology started becoming smarter. We will see a graph changing between humans and technology. Or like, you might want to see that technology becoming more conscious of its own decisions. So that's why I found it as an interesting point, and even at the same time scary point, because it's like something that we used to have for helping us is now trying to smart on us and saying, no, that may not be good, you should try out this one. So we probably now have technology for that. With technology, we were mostly using technology to say, okay, I want to get this thing done, help me to do it in the easiest fashion. But right now technology is like, oh, okay, you might want to use this. So that's what I was really concerned about. And that's when I picked on the point that I would go for a song, make a song which is before 1950s, when I would take the checkpoint for me. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.